So, Johnny, this week I thought we'd talk about going abroad. Now, we both travelled, thankfully, due to our entertainment credentials. First time you went abroad, where did you go?
I went to Wiesbaden in Germany. I was with London management at the time, and they decided to send me now to Wiesbaden to do the American bases.
Right.
And I'd never been abroad before. I was really young, in my late teens and early 20s, something like that. And anyhow, they sent me by train. So I went by train and boat. I thought, right. I don't believe it. So I get there, and I was on 50 quid a week, which I thought was a lot of money in the 60s. But of course, Germany was very expensive. I was out of money in 2 days. I mean, breakfast would cost you a bob, you know. Anyway, so I arrived now at this place, and I don't know where I'm going to stay. So there was the agent's office was near a hotel called the Weissesross Hotel. Okay, so I thought, well, I'll stay there then. So I go in this Weissesross, and I go upstairs. Now it was a bit run down, and I'd never seen a duvet before because we only had blankets and sheets in those days.
Later down.
So I rung down and said, "Hey, somebody hasn't made the bed," I said. Because it was a duvet, wasn't it? So that was the start. And then some of the clubs, it was an amazing experience because sometimes you'd be on with a big orchestra and sometimes you'd be on with a pianist who couldn't read the echo. You know, it was one of those kind of gigs. See, and they take you then every day, they'd pick you up in a car, probably with another couple of artists, and take you to like Frankfurt or Mannheim or Heidelberg and just drive you to a gig, you know, with all the American bases. They're dotted all about that area of Germany. Mm-hmm. I'll never forget, there was one nicknamed the Snake Pit. And the reason was it was segregated. It was black one side and white the other, and they didn't like each other. So they're aiming Coca-Cola cans and at each other and so on. The band had chicken wire over them to stop the band getting thumped with these people throwing stuff across from one side to the other. Anyhow, the next gig I did was with an all-girl band called Ivy Benson's band, and they were all girls, like 15 of them. And boy, could they read. They were fantastic. They're wailing, this band. So that I had a great time with them. And then they take you about in the car and tell you all over the blinking place. So that was my first sojourn to anywhere abroad. You know what I mean? And there was the agent, I always remember, he was a fellow called Charlie Klopp. He was half Cherokee Indian and half German American. And he wanted to handle me. I want to be your agent, John. He said, I can make you a big star. Take you to Vegas. I said, well, I've just signed with London management. He said, they won't do anything for you. He was right, actually. They were too quick.
But those American bases, they were like little bits of America, weren't they? They were, you know, they had Coca-Cola, they had all the bits.
Well, there was a thing called the PX where they used to go and buy stuff if you were in the forces, and you could buy anything from a Coca-Cola to an E-Type Jag, and you get all this like discount off and stuff. See, but it was, I mean, Wiesbaden at the time, it was a thriving place. There was a place called the Wilhelmstrasse, which was a lovely big road. One side was a casino called the Spielbank, and the other side was all beautiful cafes and shops. And we used to sit there it was early summer, I remember. We used to sit outside having our Frühstück, which is German for breakfast. And there was all these GIs about, and it was a thriving place, you know. Yeah. There's a buzz about the place.
Yeah, I only did the American bases once, but it left its mark. We flew in. They flew us in, a little band, and they said all the equipment will be there. Of course, when we got there, most of the equipment wasn't there, so we had to cobble everything together. And we asked where the stage was, and it was a tank transporter. That's what it was, on the back of a tank transporter. It was a beautiful summer's day, but far too hot. And again, I mean, most of the soldiers, I think they'd probably signed up when they were drunk back home in Mississippi or whatever. So they didn't want to be there. All they wanted was the barbecue, which was fantastic, I have to say. And then the promoter, he was American German. He was a funny cross. I think he was a German, but he spoke with an American accent. And at the end, he'd arranged for us all to sing a song called "Let the Circle Be Unbroken," and we'd never heard it. But it was on the list, so we just sort of like strummed along with I think one of the Americans leading it.
Is it Wiesbaden or Frankfurt? Where was it?
It was in Germany, Johnny. I don't know. I got off the plane and I got back on a couple of days later, and I had no idea.
I mean, the British were based around Cologne, see, and all the Americans were up around Frankfurt.
Oh, it must have been that way then. Yeah,
Yeah.
there were definitely no Brits there except the people in the band, and I was by the end of it, I wasn't sure about them anymore. Then we could trust them. But yeah, great experiences. I know that you did the Gibraltar Song Contest. Now that was on a different level, wasn't it? Because that's all hotels and that's flights and the whole thing.
Yeah. Well, yeah, that's right. I mean, my record company sent some demos out to the Gibraltar Festival, and they chose one that I was singing. It was written by Jeff Stevens, the guy that wrote Winchester Cathedral. So they flew me out, put me in the Rock Hotel. It was wonderful. I was married, my first wife at the time. She came, and we were there with. There was 15 of us singing, all different. You know, it was all Brits, but they were all singing different songs. And there was a lovely girl singer. Her name was Rosanella Love Band, and that was her real name.
Rosanella Love Band.
That was her real name, and she used to sing with Joe. She used to do lots of stuff on the radio with Top of the Pops, or not Top of the Pops, Parade of the Pops, and things like that. And her husband was a fellow called Doug Henny. He was a great guitar player, bass player. Anyhow, she had 2 songs in it, and I thought, oh, she's going to win it. She was like, she had a belting voice, Shirley Bassey-ish, you know. And she had 2 really great songs. So we all sang, 15 of us sang first. And then they whittled it down to 10, I think. Then they had to sing it again. They whittled it down to 5. Now I'm still in the 5, so is Rosanella. She's got 2 songs in it. And I thought, oh, she's going to get this. So anyway, it comes down to the final 3. And they go, 3rd is Rosanella with So-and-So. I thought, oh, she's going to have the number 1 as well. Number 2 is Rosanella with the other one. And number 1 was me.
Yay! Fantastic. I mean, when you go on those sort of like scale trip, we went to Hilversum once, in Holland.
Right.
And I'd made some gospel type records, and basically it was me and 2 girl singers tracked up. So, but they wanted the People's Praise Band to come along and sing. So we grabbed about 5 or 6 other people, and we all went out there. We got out, then they got us white suits, because everybody had to be in a white suit. And then they had the Royal Dutch Philharmonic Orchestra or something. And so we got there, and we'd been rehearsing with a couple of tapes. So suddenly there's this magnificent orchestra all around us. Some people on the stage with our band had never been on stage before. And they treated us like superstars. And then we came back and caught the bus home.
Well, it's like when I left Gibraltar, because I won it. I mean, it's only a small place, Gibraltar. Everybody's at the airport because they'd all seen it on the TV there. I was like Tom Jones leaving the place. You know what I mean? But I tell you, I got to tell you a story. When I was on the ships, I used to do the QE2 a lot, see? And there was some right characters, and the maitre d' was Liverpudlian. And he used to try and he used to do the announcement for the food and that, and he'd put the accent on, see? And he'd go, ladies and gentlemen, may I take this opportunity for reminding you that dinner will be served at 8:30. and breakfast will be 8:45. See, so those are stuff. And it was there was the big restaurant. You ever been on the ship?
No, never done the ship. Never done the ships.
Well, so you got the maitre d', he takes your order, and then you got the busboy that goes out and gets the food. See, now you get a lot of high flyers on these boats, right? And especially on a world cruise, you get like older people, and they're used to this kind of life. So anyway, this guy now, he says, I'm just going for a cigarette, he said to the busboy. Whatever you do, don't serve the customers. You wait till I come back, right? Didn't trust him. So anyway, this woman now sees this brother. She goes, whatever his name was, he's a little tag, John, come here. So he has to go over, say, can you tell me what would you suggest for dinner? So he said, get on a cottage pie, it's boss. So the husband said, what did he say? He said, get on the cottage pie, dear, it's boss. So he said, well, what about this soup? No, don't have the soup, it's garbo. He said, what did he say? He said, the soup's garbo, dear. So what's this souffle? What if some kind of souffle? He said, oh, that's just a bit of sponge cake with a bit of swag chucked over it. I mean, this woman's face. I couldn't believe. I mean, couldn't make it up. Oh God! And then I'm coming off the queue. We came into somewhere, and I'm leaving the ship at St. Martin in the Caribbean. So, but they couldn't dock because it's such a big ship. We're anchored off, and we had to come in on a tender boat. So I've got my case on top of the tender boat. I mean, the case falls in the water. I lose all my stuff. Everything goes in the water. Music, clothes. Oh God! Some of the things happened to me. I don't know.
Yeah. No, when you're on the ship and you're an entertainer, are you? Yeah. Well, it sounds like you're actually in amongst all the people on the cruise as well. Are you?
Well, they treat you like a passenger, see. So you only do 2 or 3 shows a week. I mean, the first time I went on a ship, I couldn't believe it. I was going to Montreal, and I said, "When am I working?" He said, "Thursday." So I said, okay, did Thursday. When you're working, you're working next Friday now. You like 2 shows because there's all different acts on board. Yeah. And of course, the same passengers don't want to see the same act every night. So you just do a couple of gigs.
What do you do in the meantime?
Well, you've got a lovely cabin. You eat in a restaurant. You're like, you're like a passenger. Wow. But having said that, once you've done your first gig, you're their property, if you like. So everywhere you go, you're stopped. Oh, hey, John, loved the show last night. Yeah. And of course, as you know, Mal, everybody knows about show business better than you. This guy came up to me and said, "Hey, John, you know what? I like this play. That song you sung, that sucked. I don't like that. You know what you want to sing? You want to..." And he's giving me all this advice. So I said, "What do you do, sir?" He said, "I'm a gynecologist." I said, well, you know what they say? If you want to know about show business, ask a gynecologist. And I walked away. You should have seen it. Because they do, don't they? They all know better than you.
All right. Yeah. So those are the not the nice trips, but those are trips that are very well organised. What about then going to some of the more far-flung corners on your own? Now, I know that you went to South Africa. Went to Africa quite a few times, didn't you? And that must have been Swaziland. It must have been quite an eye-opener, was it?
Well, it was because... the first time I went to South Africa, I didn't realize it because it was going back in early 70s. It was still apartheid. And I didn't know what apartheid was. I was young, wasn't I? And it was like everything was segregated. There would be a white bench and there'd be a black bench. There'd be a white lift and a black lift. There'd be a white beach and a black. I couldn't believe this because coming from Britain, you don't see it. Mm-hmm. And I didn't really like it, to be honest. It felt rather uncomfortable. But the next time I went back there, I went to the independent countries like Botswana, Lesotho, and Swaziland. And they had these big hotels up there. The Royal Swazi Spa, it was a wonderful hotel. The golf course had been done by Gary Player, and big stars used to appear there, you know. I think, was it Sammy Davis opened it? One of the big stars opened it anyway. Wow. But I'm there with my wife, and it caught fire when I was there. So I'm in my bedroom now, in my room, and I had the ground floor level, that's right by the pool. And Owen's in the bath. And she said, "Hey, John, I can feel there's a funny noise under this bath." She said, "I don't know what's going on," like a rumble. So I could hear people running about in the passage. So I go out in the passage, and there's this black woman, and one of the maids, she's screaming, she said, get out, there's a fire. And what had happened, one of the big gas canisters had exploded in the kitchen, and the whole place was going up. Wow. So I said to Owen, right, get the clothes and the music out onto the lawn. We're out of here. See? So we're dragging all the stuff out. All the money I'd accumulated before I got there from the other gigs, I had in the safe. So I rush into the foyer, and the girls, I said, I got to open the safe. I got my passports and my money. She throws the keys at me and runs off. I could have opened everybody's. So I got my money, and the whole wing went up. They sent for the Swazi, the Swazi, what do you call it? The fire brigade. They turned up without any water. So you have to take the water out of the swimming pool. And the worst thing, the following week, I still had to do my gig. There were 2 hotels next to it, which were the same complex. So I did my gig then in Yezelwani, which was the other hotel down the road. But it was basically the restaurant, which looked like a bit like a self-service bloody cafeteria, right? Mm-hmm. Anyhow, who's following me in was an American comedian called Shelley Berman. So the boss said, he was a fellow called Gerald Sadley, who was slightly posh. He says, come and see John working. He said, I can't work here. It's a cafeteria. Anyway, so I did my gig and they were a good audience. And I sang a Welsh song with Olwen. He said, gee, I love that ethnic number. That was Swaziland. And where else did I work after that? I went all over the blinking place. But one of the best gigs, I think, Australia, I did Australia. You ever do Australia with the band?
We are. Tell you now that you tell me. You show me yours and I'll show you mine.
Okay. Well, I did a gig for an agent called Lionel Abrams in Sydney. So I fly out now to Sydney and he's got all these gigs like the South Sydney Juniors Club. Now, these are rugby clubs, okay? But anything like our rugby clubs is no comparison. There's like 200 one-arm bandits in one room, a swimming pool and a restaurant, and it's like huge. And a big cabaret room with a 10-piece band. People like Neil Sedaka have been there the week before. Do you know what I mean? So I'm doing all these lovely gigs. Anyhow, they send me up country now with Jerry Marsden of the Pacemakers. And I forget where we went. We had to go through Wagga Wagga. I thought they'd made that up. And we get to this club and I said, where's the band? And it was a Maori band. And all they're doing is like hitting like big logs and that. See? So I said, where's it? So I got a pianist and this guy hitting logs. That's my backing band.
Like being back in the clubs at the valleys, man.
Yeah. So on the way back, right, it's dark. And all of a sudden, the driver says, you wouldn't read about it, would you? I said, what's happened? The lights have gone out. So he gets out of the car and 2 stones have simultaneously smashed the headlights. So we got no lights. We can't drive anywhere because there's no street lights. You're in the middle of nowhere. Yeah. So we had to sit there till the sun came up, wait for the... He said, if I keep going, he said, I'll hit one of the kangaroos. He said, I got to stop. So, I mean, that was unbelievable. But some of the gigs were really good. Go on, you're Australia.
All right, well, I went with Max. It was 1987. It was a funny old year. I had a couple of songs recorded by Cliff Richard and the Hollies, and I got through to the Song for Europe final, and none of them had come through. And I was feeling a bit sorry for myself. I had a phone call from Max. He said, Mal, me and the boys are going out to do a tour of Southeast Asia. Do you want to come with us? I thought it was a godsend, isn't it? So got on the plane, landed in Hong Kong. Have you done Hong Kong?
Yeah, I went via Hong Kong. No, yeah, via Hong Kong. So I went Pan Am from London, Hong Kong to Sydney. And on the way back, I came the other way back via Los Angeles.
Oh, it's great when you used to fly into Kai Tak through the, you could see everybody in all the washing and everything.
It frightened the life out of me before they built the new airport. You had to cut. It was like this.
That's good. So we arrived and we did a couple of gigs in a couple of hotels, Harbour View, Kowloon. That was lovely. China Fleet Club, the golf club, and it was my birthday while I was out there in the first week in Hong Kong, and it was one of those things I didn't want to tell anybody, but the longer the day went on, the more disappointed I was that nobody was saying happy birthday. Anyway, somebody phoned home and they said, oh, it's Mal's birthday today, so Max took us out onto Kowloon. We went to this Vietnamese restaurant. I remember going down these stairs, there's a Hammond organ, a lot of Vietnamese people, some Chinese people, and us. There was Max and the band and a lady called Eve Graham, and it was like a karaoke bar, but without the karaoke. It was just a Hammond organ. So we sort of monopolised the night, really. And I remember Eve Graham got up and I played I'd like to teach the world to sing. Nothing. No reaction from the crowd at all. Max got up. This is a true story. He undid his shirt. He told everybody he was Tom Jones. He sang the green, green grass of home, and we didn't buy a beer or chips all night. It was fantastic. Then we went to Korea. Korea was really interesting, flying across the Mekong Delta. I remember me. Now, the other funny thing was in Hong Kong, I was staying, my best friend, the guitarist, was a guy called Peter King. Right. Well, of course, we're in Hong Kong, and I'm staying with P. King. So, every time he said it, people thought he was taking the mickey. Even Elvis Chan, who was our waiter at one stage, Elvis Chan. I remember poor old Elvis, because there was 4 of us from Swansea there. We got little Elvis, and going, come on, Elvis, give us a song. Give us a...
Yeah.
In the end, he said, have me tender, have me true. We gave him a big
Did you
tip.
go to the Philippines? Did you go to the Philippines?
No. Have you done the Philippines?
Yeah, I was coming back from Australia. So the agent said, if you want to go, do you want to do a gig on the way home to the Philippines? I said, well, he said, it's ready. He said, because it's American based, I'll give you cash, dollars. So I said, okay. He said, but be careful. The Philippines, they all carry guns. In the old days, they did, see. He said, so when you get in there, wait for the agent to pick you up. His name's Ascot. No, what was he called? Ching Imperial.
Wow, what a name. Sounds like a toilet bowl. Sounds like something you see in a loo.
I know. So I arrive at the airport, this big black limo turns up and the window goes, bzzz, get in, bzzz. I'm like, get in. He takes me to some hotel. He says, okay, I'm taking you up country tomorrow to work in Subic Bay. Subic Bay was when the big American aircraft carriers used to come in, see. So he said, we got you somewhere to stay up there. So they take me up to Subic Bay. And there was a flat they used to give to the artists, but the girl singer from the week before was still in it. So I said, well, where am I going to stay tonight? So I had this bloke called Gus, who was my driver. He said, I find somewhere for you. So he finds this place, and it turned out that I go in there, there's no window in this room, and it was boiling hot. You know what the Philippines, it's like steaming.
Yes.
I said, I can't live in this. Anyway, I left the light on all night, and I had a fan. I got up in the morning, I was in a brothel. That's where they put me up, in this bloody whorehouse. Unbelievable. And then he said, you talking about Vietnam? He said, do you want to go to Vietnam? I said, what do you mean? He said, we drop you in an helicopter. He said, what we do is they hover and so they can't get you with the heat missiles. And then they drop you into the clear. I said, I'm not doing that. I said, I'm going home.
You've reminded me about the Philippines. We were in a hotel bar in this Harbour View, and we'd done a gig, and it was a lovely gig. And then we came back in, and there was this lovely Filipino band, beautiful.
Yeah.
I mean, they were brilliant musicians, lovely singers.
You know, they copy everything, but perfectly.
Yeah, it was like Lionel Richie, the whole lot. Anyway, we sat around afterwards, and we bought each other drinks and all that. I think we probably had a tab, to be honest. Anyway, we got them drinks, and we started talking, and the drummer said, so where are you boys from? We said, we're from Great Britain. He said, so where in Great Britain? He said, we come from a place called Wales. He said, north or south? This is Ray, the Filipino drummer in South Wales. He said, where in South Wales? We said, well, Swansea. He said, oh, my wife comes from Troyesville Road. He'd married a Welsh girl, and in fact, the next time I saw him, it was back home in Swansea. He was playing in a jazz band. Hello, Ray. It's a small world. Yeah, we went to Australia and New Zealand with Max, and it was just we did the Parramatta Rugby Club or Rugby League Club.
Oh,
and
I did Parramatta. Did you? It's where all the car showrooms are Parramatta.
Oh, I mean, just as you say, just phenomenal size.
Oh, huge.
We followed a magician. Max followed a magician. And all the way through his act, we'll have to get Max on because he'd probably tell the story much better. But all the way through because the magician, there were pigeons flying, doves flying everywhere, and every time Max told a gag or something or told a story, he'd just go like this. It was a life changing. I remember we flew over the mountains of China, and I thought to myself, it's a big world, Johnny Tudor. It's a very big world.
And if you fly out of Sydney and you go the other way back, you're flying over Australia for like 6 hours. It's so big.
Yeah.
I mean, because I went, as I say, I came back via Los Angeles then. So I went right around the world on Pan. It was called Flipper Flight 1. I think I'll never forget it. But I liked Australia. I liked the Australians. I liked the audiences. They were a bit like the Welsh audience. They like you. They give you a great send-off. I really enjoyed it.
Actually, with Max, even though we were in Australia, it was a Welsh audience. I mean, that was amazing. Everywhere we went, we had tins of Welsh cakes, people in tears. We kept on bumping into people from. I remember it was because Max went there in '87 because it was the Rugby World Cup, and I remember I held the plane up in Auckland. They said, where have you been? I said, well, I'm talking to the guy on the counter. He's from Bryn Nyfryd. He's from my home, and actually ended up in Perth, which is the most isolated city in the world, so they say. And that afternoon, I met somebody I was in school with, just in a toy shop. I thought,
it's crazy, isn't it? Yeah, do you know what? I was in. Well, a couple of things have happened to me. I was in Australia walking down Bondi Beach.
Right.
And who's coming towards me is Jerry the Pacemakers. Hello, lad. How's it going? Because I'd worked with him in Liverpool, see? I mean, you don't expect to see people you know that far away, do you?
No, it's amazing. It's a lovely feeling as well.
What's the area in Swansea where it's upper or lower?
Oh, Cumtor. Up Come Turco.
Yeah, there's a lovely story. You reminded me of it about the bloke that wants to go. He wants to go to some Himalayan village right in the middle of nowhere. So he goes to Cwmtwr and he goes to the station. He says, I want to go to this place in the Himalayas. Oh, you'll have to get a train from here to Cardiff first, he said. He said, all right, okay. And then get a train from there. So he goes to Cardiff. And he said, I want to go to this Himalayas. All right, you get a train to London and then you'll have to get another train, flight from there. And eventually he gets to this little village in the middle of nowhere, right? And he has enough now. He wants to go home. So he sees this as Indian book. He said, I want to go home, he said. I want to go to Cwmtwr, he said, upper or lower, sir. That's lovely, isn't it?
Do you know what? You've reminded me now, because I did a tour once, a couple of tours with a guy called Art Garfunkel. And it was
I think I know who
you've heard of it. But the thing is, so there's a different level of right, when you were booked to do those hotels, you get a flight and you get paid for doing it. So when you're in rock and roll and they offer you a support tour, sometimes you have to buy yourself onto it. So you have to pay them to be on it.
Oh, wow.
And if not, they give you the gigs and you get to the gigs yourself. So we've got, if luckily sometimes they had a tour bus, other times they didn't. So I remember we did a gig in Italy. Well, actually, it's a place called Campione, which is across the border.
Who pays you then if you have to do your own gig?
Exactly, nobody. You have to sell.
Oh
I mean, at the end of every gig, I'd be out there with my bag of CDs, and advertising them and selling the CDs. And thank God it worked out. But it was a great break. I told lots of stories about it since, but it was a worrying time. So I was in Lake Como. And they were all catching a flight from Milan to Prague, and I had to get to Prague. I had 3 days to get to Prague. I mean, so how do you do it? Well, I grabbed my guitar, my suitcase. I walked to the railway station. And I said, I'd like to buy a ticket. I'd like to buy a ticket to Prague, please. And they did it. I mean, he went, through the Alps. I think it was Stuttgart. Then I got on a sleeper train from Stuttgart to Prague. And it was a shared compartment. So there were two American young students and a Czechoslovakian guy who was deaf. But he hadn't been back since 1968. And so you all say, you get talking and what are you doing? It's 68 and we're on. Yeah. And so I'm there with my guitar, on the sleeper train. Say, what are you doing? I say, I'm on tour with Art Garfunkel. I mean, nobody believed me, did they? They think you'd be travelling in a limousine. So, but it was a great, sometimes the journey is actually better the longer it takes and the more twists and turns.
They sent me, when I did the one in Wiesbaden, the agent decided to send me to Naples to do the NATO base. So he didn't send me by plane, he sent me by train. So on a train now, which took forever to get to Naples, through Switzerland, the works. We're going through Switzerland and the restaurant went on strike. So I had no food. By the time I got there, I'm dying of hunger, right? And I get to there and I'm doing, the NATO base was great because it was the officers in the NATO base. And then they said, you've got to do a show for the Bluebirds, he said. I said, where are they? Oh, that's the Navy Club down on the Pier Head. So I go down there and there's 4 MPs on the corner. Every corner of the stage is a bloke stood with a gun, see? I said, what's this about? He said, oh, they got to be there. He said, because they get a bit drunk, the sailors, and they try to grab the performer, especially if it's a girl, So I thought, that's bloody good, isn't it? Anyway, the band come in and they can't read a word of English or they can't speak English and they don't read the music. I said, well, how am I going to do this? So the girl singer could speak a bit of English. She said, they read tonic sol fa. I said, what, do, re, mi? He said, yeah. So I got like the sheet music and it's got, as you know, C, G, F, whatever. And she is translating this now. She's going, do, re, and they played it. And they did all my set with her translating. And how the hell they did it, I'll never know in my life. Fantastic it was.
The thing is, as you say, a lot of people collect money.
Yeah.
And good on them. Well done to them. But if you do this sort of life, you do collect stories, don't you? You collect people along the way,
Yeah.
I went to do an album in Nashville. And then we had a Sunday off, me and Nigel Hopkins from Forest Fach. So we thought, we're never going to be here again. So let's go down to Memphis. Went down to Memphis on a Sunday and we did the tour, Graceland, the whole lot. It was fantastic. We went to see some studios. 6 weeks later, I'm back there doing a TV program. And then another couple of weeks later, I'm back there doing a radio program. I went back 3 times in 1 year. But I was writing a song along the journey in the Deep South about gospel music. And outside on Main Street, where Elvis bought his first guitar in Tupelo, there was a hardware store.
He came here with his mum. He wanted to buy a rifle. She said, if you buy a guitar, I'll go halves with you. So he bought a guitar. I came to Tupelo, Mississippi, to see a poor man's 2-room shack. Well, I came to see the birthplace of the king. And the more I get to know him, as the story gets rolled back, it was gospel music made the poor boys sing, made Elvis sing.
And the lady who was there, she was fantastically, we became very friends, a big friend, Pat Raspberry. She said, Mal, you've got a lovely voice. I said, well, thank you very much, Miss Pat. And she said, you must come back and judge our Elvis Presley Songwriting Festival. I thought, well, that's lovely,
wow.
And I thought, well, that's never going to happen. Anyway, next year I went back.
Wow.
Went down into Tupelo and got to meet all of Elvis's aunties and his cousins and people he'd been to school with. I made a radio program about it. Met some of the Memphis Mafia, people like Jerry Schilling, who'd been with him all the way through that, the Vegas years. And then I did a safari, a cultural safari with Tad, the cultural safari guy. He had a pink Cadillac. And we were going around all these unusual places. So we went to a juke joint. Do you know what a juke joint is?
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's like there's whiskey and there's blues and it's from the Delta.
That's right. Yeah.
And it was Wild Bill's juke joint, and Wild Bill was at 85 or something like that. And we were waiting for him to come, and I'm trying to make conversation. But obviously, there's a little bit of, I'm very white. And, the cultural thing in the Deep South, it's still there. So I'm trying my best to be friendly, And so, Wild Bill, I said, how is he? And they said, he's 85. I said, why do they call him Wild Bill then? And they said, well, he likes his music wild. He likes his whiskey wild. He likes his women wild. And I said, I said, he's 85. Is he still wild? Trying to make... He said, well, he doesn't drink so much whiskey anymore. One more then from me, just going down to Clarksdale in the Delta. Clarksdale's where Robert Johnson sold his soul to the devil, so he could play great blues guitar. And so I was in this, and it was a great service. And the voice of the guy who led the singing was like, it was like right out of Africa. In the middle of what appeared to be a normal service, this man jumped to his feet. An incantation rose and just took over. It was obvious that despite the 400 or so years these people have been linked to America, the song connected them to another land deep in their consciousness. And the vicar was great, the pastor, the Reverend Willie Morganfield. And he used to do this thing called hooping. So you half preach and you half sing. So well, Lord says, ooh, yeah, and it was, yeah, brother. And it was fantastic. So I'm having a chat with him afterwards. And it turns out the Reverend Willie Morganfield is Muddy Waters' first cousin. So Muddy Waters went to the dark side, as they say, and the Reverend Willie Morganfield became a preacher.
But they started, didn't they, these people in the gospel and singing in church and that.
Absolutely. And they went to one place. Oh, this is two more stories. A couple of years later, I'm back doing a radio program for Radio Wales. This blues guy comes in. He's come down. He's really good, and his name is Willie Morganfield. He's Muddy Waters' son. So he walks into the studio. He's tuning up and says, "Oh, hi, Willie. I know your Uncle Willie from Clarksdale."
It opens your eyes when you travel, though, doesn't it? Mm-hmm. I mean, you learn so much. Yeah. You go around the world, you meet different peoples, and they are. Most of them are salt of the earth. They're great,
Yeah.
I mean, they take you into their homes, give you food and all this,
And particularly when there's music involved or entertainment involved, people just, I know they call it the international language, but it absolutely is. I remember we did a restaurant in Wellington after one of Max's gigs. It was a Chilean restaurant, and the waiters used to sing to entertain the audience. And we got up and said, can we do a song? We did a Spanish song called Lo siento mi vida. It was by Linda Ronstadt. And again, you know, there were tears when we left. Nobody was allowed to pay. We had beers all night. It was just fantastic, and that's what we've been very lucky, Johnny Tudor.
The first time I went to Spain, my old man, I was only a kid, I was about 15, and my old man was a pianist, of course. And we walked into this Benidorm, and there was hardly anything there then. There was about 3 hotels. And we passed this little bar, and we go in, and there's a piano in a corner, and there's nobody in there, hardly, only a couple. The old man gets on the piano. It was full in half an hour. People heard music, and they're all in there.
Yeah,
it's like a magnet, isn't it? Music.
It is. It absolutely is. People love it, and it reminds me now. I say that we're lucky, but I had a little chat with Wyn Calvin after we did his program.
Oh, we're blessed these days.
That's right. He said I was Ken Dodd's mother 3 times, and when I used to tell Ken that we were lucky, he said, "No, Wyn, we are blessed. We are blessed." Hey, we're lovely to see you. We have been. We certainly are. Right then. Well, it's. We've still plenty of stories to tell, but for today, it's goodbye from him.
And it's goodbye for you.
See you soon.